Did a really good amendments. The case was just starting with the leads. This has been a well-fought debate round. There's a lot of cards on case, and they're making good arguments why violence would be bad in the long run. But the reason we set up criteria, what you see is an easy way to establish ground. Once you establish criteria, once you look at the definitional intent, and then determine how you're going to evaluate the ground, it's easy at that point. Because if you feel you have to look at the outcomes, if you feel that you have to wait 20 or 30 years down the line and find out if the violent action actually paid off and the people that are oppressed are now better off, then you're probably going to go negative and you're going to vote for the University of Houston. But if you feel that they were justified in their initial intent, you're going to vote for Emory. Because obviously we're winning. The intentions were good. We're showing you 3 scenarios. Basically, Emerson Lewis are all dropping. Now please go off definitions. It's a noble effort for him to get up to 2 and R and make his first indict against our definition. But the definition has been out there since the beginning of the 1AC, the first 5 seconds, that said the intent is that to show intent or to be justified, you just have to show grounds for it. Grounds are obviously the initiation of why you acted. Now, Rawls on criteria, that's where I am now, on criteria, tells you that the nature of justification depends if you look at the intent. It says you have to show the grounds or the rationality for why you started that starting point. We established a starting point. We showed you that they're acting to prevent certain situations or certain scenarios in which they're dropping a case, and they're justifying that intent, right? Now he's arguing these answers in 2 and R. He's saying that we're not having a moral increase in the answers, therefore not justified. But the intent of justification has still been upheld. You're still justified. Just as the example of stop smoking that we've been applying, you were justified in your decision to stop smoking, regardless if you didn't have the willpower and you went back to smoking, you would still be justified. Also in the cross-examination, we've established that if you were going to the store to buy milk because you were thirsty, you were justified. If you get hit by a Mack truck, that does not justify your intent. Obviously, you're going to have some moral groundwork. Now, you might be asking yourself at this point, why, what should I accept? Just because Ross says look at the intent, why should I accept it? Well, the answer is real easy. Now look at the visa point. We have 2 cards, Boyle and Joseph. Both cards say that in war is indeterminable. That both sides, non-violence and violence, are going to have negative consequences, and that you cannot determine the moral ramifications of those consequences. That the only way you can establish any kind of framework to judge around or judge the word justified would be to look at the intent, right? If you don't, you can please, if you need to, read this card out around. It says bad consequences as a result. Whether one or fights or does not fight in the war. The only way to look at it is, is that intent good or was he justified in the intent? That's what we're going to have to win here, and that's what the resolution said. And since they're dropping the definition of justified, I don't even know how they can make these arguments. Please extend to that point that intent is the only criteria and that success is irrelevant. Please go to case. We are clearly looking at this. He says it does not show last resort and the presumptions against and things like this, and we have to show how all is spelled. These are not answers. These are blinds or these are precedents. The evidence indicates, the Caldestin, the Taylor evidence, and the Turner says that it is irrelevant to this. If you feel you've all used all your other means, you are justified if that's the last response. And Taylor evidence independently takes this out. It says in moral traditions, it is the first response is justified to violence if you feel it is your last resort. On the second observation of liberation, he says it feeds his argument off case, but obviously his argument off case is assuming 30 years down the line when the repressive governments will get worse. This says it is a fundamental right. Regardless if you increase repression, regardless if you have a bad outcome, it is your fundamental right, and that is an independent justification. On the last observation, on observation 3, self-defense, I have this being virtually just deny or drop the entire debate. He's getting to it with 2 seconds at the end of every speech and saying, look, it can't be self-defense if you're fighting political oppression, but the evidence that Katie reads to you says that in certain political oppressive regimes, it is a mode of self-defense because they are threatening your life and it's your last alternative. And that is an independent justification. The final part, and that's just international law, but regardless of any other reasons, you feel we're justified because international law and the charter state that, then you vote on that one part, international and public case. That's an easy way out for you. On his off case, he leads. He's getting these, and he's just not making the arguments. He's making too many drops. He says, pull it off. It's irrelevant. Last resort is always a problem. And at worst, it denies the assumption. He is dropping the part that I'm reading, and is being extended to 1AR. It says violence rehumanizes the people, and it gives them a feeling of self and respect. Last resort and all this, what is this argument? He's not explaining this. This is not persuasive to an R on this issue, because he's in no way extending the argument across. We are saying it's last response, and it's justified, and that you do not look at this intent, because the intent is the only thing you look at. On justification, he's saying it must occur, and there's other means, and last resort equals least, but he's not taking up the argument on that this does not meet criteria. That criteria is irrelevant as long as we're proving you have self-defense or last means you're justified. Rational means we can't make value judgments or no proper judgments. This would destroy debate. The moral part says you can't make rational judgments unless you look at the intent. We're offering you a clear standard. We're offering the only standard that you can justify moral ramifications. He's not just competing bill evidence. Now, below is the allegiance argument. He says that it's the state, they must have allegiance. But obviously, the self-determination is going to be taking this out. This also grants sovereignty that people are our regime, our regime that they're oppressing the people is a fundamental right. This is bad outcome, and the intent is pure, but this is irrelevant to the question of justification, right? He's dropping his other observations on the bottom on justification and objectivity. To that extent, you have only one definition of the word justified. You know your justified intent, and regardless if you feel that violence in the long run will produce more repression, you're still justified in the initial intent, because you know it's moral, and you know you have 3 criteria which establish it. These reasons, please vote affirmative.
Hi, Mom.